All right. Hello, everyone. Yes. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We are very excited to be kicking off our event, Making Moves, What Comes After Your Best Job Ever. I'm joined here by Will Post and Macy Tanking, who are just two phenomenal individuals who just work so well together, are great friends, and I'm really excited for you all to be able to hear from them and hear their engagement and their experience. My name is Hannah Slover. I am the community manager over at Purpose Jobs. If you're not familiar, Purpose Jobs is a recruitment marketplace focused on promoting both the Midwest and within the tech and startup industries. So we're really excited to have everyone here. Today we'll be focused on career path and pivots, virtual job searches, and remote work. Really hearing it through the eyes of Macy and Will. As we chat, or as the conversation continues, please use the chat to share anything that really resonates with you or any questions. We'll try to get to questions either throughout the conversation or save the last 10 to 15 minutes, as we want to hear what you all have to ask and be able to answer and offer advice there. But without further ado, I want to kick things off. So Will, why don't we start with you? Can you just kind of start by telling us a little bit about yourself, walk us through your journey and career paths leading up to Facebook?
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you, first of all, Hannah. It's really good to be with you. Macy, always good to be with you. So my name is Will Post. I live in the Chicago area. I say that because I used to always say I'm based in Chicago, but now I feel like I'm based in Evanston because I'm based in like this room, where I've gotten very comfortable for the past 2 years. So I'm in, the second decade of my career, about 16 years in the working world. I've been at big companies most of my career, even prior to Facebook, where I just left and had spent 8 years. And I'm currently in my first early stage, much, much smaller company and having a ball with it so far. Today is my 91st day in my new job. So you can tell I'm acutely aware of that 90-day marker. But the long and short on me, I've been an ad guy almost my whole career, and even studied advertising while I was in school. Came up through the agency space, then made the switch into traditional media, and spent a good number of years at the Wall Street Journal, and then made the jump from traditional media to what at the time was very non-traditional media, by jumping over to Facebook. So have been in a few markets. My career is kind of split between early days New York and then Chicago for the past 8 years. And that's me. I'm just so excited to be here with you today having this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Will. Macy, I'll flip it over to you. Same question.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to echo a thanks also, Hannah. Great to be here. My career began, I graduated with a marketing degree in December of 01. And if you think back to what was happening at the time, that was right after 9/11. And companies were in panic mode. Nobody was hiring. I couldn't get a job for free. Where I was like, just don't pay me, just let me get some experience. And so I went to work for Nordstrom. I went to work for Southwest Airlines. I finally ended up going back to grad school. And it was after I graduated with my MBA, I had 2 degrees and no experience. And so I was back in the same boat of saying, I just need to get some experience. So I went to work for an advertising agency out of Dallas, and I loved it, got paid peanuts, but the experience that I got in the 2 years there kind of set me for what I wanted to do with the rest of my career. And so I found out through that experience that kind of the 3 areas that I wanted to pursue were tech, sales, and coaching. I have an athletics background. I've been a coach ever since I can remember. And so finding something that I can kind of do all 3 of those things was what I wanted to pursue. And so from then I went to Microsoft. I did a few startups in New York. And I stuck into Facebook through an acquisition about 9 years ago. They acquired a small tech division from Microsoft. And it was there that I got to double down in tech and sales. And then finally, about 6 years ago, I got the opportunity to move into a leadership development role. And so I was at Facebook for 8.5 years. I now find myself on the other side of that, which feels really strange because the time at Facebook was both long and short. But I'm excited to share those experiences with y'all today.
Awesome. Well, Macy, why don't you just keep going there? Talk to us about, the title of this event is what comes after your best job ever. And that's where Will and you met. So talk to us a little bit about what made your Facebook position so phenomenal. And a little bit about your and Will's origin story too. I think too would be really fun.
I could gush on Will Post all day, every day. That's not what the title of the event is, but just know that Will has been such an instrumental part of my career journey. I've used him as a career coach, as a life coach, and he's been somebody who's helped to champion myself to remind, these are the values that you have. These are the things that you bring to the table. Don't forget that you do these things really, really well. And so working with Will over the last 5 years, when I first met him, was definitely a career highlight, and helped to kind of build out, what that next thing was. When I first came into Facebook, it was a smaller company. There's around 5,000 employees, and the ethos was very much like nothing is someone else's problem. If you see something and you want to spearhead it, go for it. And that allowed me to kind of capitalize on the experiences of knowing, I wanted to go into learning. I didn't have a formal learning role at the time. I was still in ad tech sales. But because of the company and the way that it was structured, I got to coach my colleagues. I got to coach my clients. I got to run industry events to be able to share the knowledge that I had within the ad tech space. And it was really that autonomy that I loved working there, where, the leaders that I had at Facebook and the managers that I had and the people that I got to work with, like Will, who were partners at the time, inspired some of the best work of my career, because it was however I saw being able to get from point A to point B, the company really allowed me to be able to do that. And through that, I got to explore, what are the things I really like to do? What are my areas of expertise? Where are my interests? And all of that kind of stuff. So it was a really amazing, not only professional journey working at Facebook, it was an amazing personal journey where I got to do a lot of self-exploration.
Love that. Awesome. Well, I will kick it over to you. Kind of talk to us about your Facebook journey and what made it such a great position for you.
Well, of course, I'm happy to do that, but I'm going to reciprocate and gush over Macy, because it's very much, there's a ton of mutual affection that we both have. We've been part of some of the best work I think each of us has gotten to do in our respective careers. And so a big part of what made it such a special place to be is partnerships with folks like Macy, and Macy in particular. So I would say, to summarize really quickly what made my time there so special and why I think of it as such a bright spot in my career, is hand in hand with the fact that it was also probably the hardest job I've ever had. And that was definitely, I say that in a way that I mean very favorably. I was looking for a harder job when I came to Facebook. I was looking to be challenged. I was looking to be stretched. I was looking to be uncomfortable and really be part of something that was in a build mode. It wasn't, the earliest days of Facebook. There were definitely folks that I learned from who'd been there from the very beginning. But it was at an inflection point in the company, and that made it really exciting, but also really challenging to be. It's still a hard place to work. It's still, there's, massive work for everyone who is working there. It just changed over the course of time that I was there. And I found myself again, looking to be stretched and challenged and uncomfortable in new ways, which is a big part of what led me to think, all right, I might be ready for something new. But the hardest days there were oftentimes the best days there. It was some of the best talent I've ever had permission to work with. And I felt lucky every day, and still feel lucky that I got to work alongside so many talented people from so many interesting and diverse backgrounds. And it's absolutely shaped how I think I'll go through the rest of my career based on my time there.
Love that. And I think just pulling out some of what you all said, Macy talking about self-exploration, Will, you talking about, being challenged, being uncomfortable. I think that is so important in each role that you take. So, Will, let's shift and pivot more to talk to us about, when, as you were starting to decide to leave Facebook, talk to us a little bit about that career pivot, and I think this is so relevant now, because so many people, coming out of this pandemic or still in the midst of it, however you want to take it, are thinking about, what is important to them and are oftentimes making those pivots. So talk to us about that career pivot that you made and what was important to you as you were looking for your next role.
Yeah, certainly. I would say, and this is the first time that a career change has gone this way, what I'm about to describe for me personally. The decision to leave Facebook was actually one of the later decisions I made in the whole process. I first and foremost just decided I'm ready to do some new things than what I'm doing today in my job. I had been at the company for 8 years. I had been within my role for close to 6. I had been within kind of the same space within a big organization that had only gotten bigger for a good bit of time, and felt like, all right, I know where I'm valuable. I know where my strengths are. I know how to hire a team around me. I just felt like I had good grasp of the job to be done, and I found myself really craving some new experiences. Set that against everything about how we go to work changing, where I was no longer literally going to work, but just getting comfortable in this room, maybe distracted by a fewer things, like what was the next meeting I was supposed to literally travel to, or business travel, or all of that kind of prompted me to take stock in, hang on, slow down for a moment. What am I actually doing? What do I really love about my workday, and what would I love to introduce to it? And so that prompted in me a kind of a different search and hunt than just, I'm ready to leave this company and I want to go find another company to work for. I actually thought for quite some time I was probably looking for a role within Facebook. And I'll be honest enough, I think it's appropriate given the nature of purpose and all that you focus on. I wasn't even sure if what I was looking for was a job. Like, I might just be looking for something else to put my energy into. So Macy and I have talked about this a little bit. I kind of started first just like on an energy hunt of like, what am I actually looking to get out of something, and what am I looking to develop it in the way of skills and experiences that may very well be a job, or it might add some nuances or intricacies to my job, but it might not be a traditional job hunt where it starts on LinkedIn and you just look for who's hiring. So that was kind of the impetus for what led me to then go through a pretty lengthy exploration of opportunities that were out there. And yes, ultimately, as part of that, I had to make a decision if I was ready to leave the company.
Yeah. And tell me, what are you doing currently now?
So I am at a early stage tech company called VidMob that still works within the ad tech space. I get to continue to work with a lot of great advertisers and a lot of friends and colleagues from platforms like Facebook and Snap, and folks I've gotten to work with throughout the course of my career, all focused on creative effectiveness and the creative analytics space, which when I go back to the very early part of where I started in advertising, it was in the creative space. And so this feels in a large way applying the earliest experiences I had in my career to the last few years I've spent in tech, and I'm having a ball so far.
Yeah. And I love how you described it, like finding that energy hunt. I'm curious, what about your role now? What clicked with that energy hunt for them?
Well, a number of things. I definitely found a lot of passion very quickly for the business that was being built here. I also I found myself gravitating towards reaching out to founders and folks that were in build mode when I first started doing some outreach to just see what was going on in the space outside of the immediate company I worked for. And so it really comes down to having found a deep personal connection with both the business that was being built and the people who were building it. And through that, I got a pretty good sense of, okay, I think I know what I'm looking for. I think I know if this does trigger a job change for me, what kind of job would I want it to be? Who would I want to be working with and working for? And this opportunity just hit more marks than I think I would have even known to look for.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, Macy, we'll flip things over to you. Talk to us a little bit about what inspired your career pivot and what it is that you're doing now.
Yeah, the idea of the energy hunt, this is why Will is on my board of directors, and I recommend everybody getting somebody that you can have honest conversations with and say, what do I want to do? Where do I want to spend my time? And so looking back, what inspired this, it wasn't kind of a one day I woke up and I said, I want to do something different. This has been a decision that's been in the making for a while. And I am big on finding your own personal values and understanding what can I be doing in my life, both in the office and outside of the office, to optimize towards those personal values. And early on in my career, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, earlier in my career, I was at the bottom of that, where I had to pay my bills. I had, I optimized for a paycheck and a title. I'm now coming from a place of privilege. Like I understand, like this is something that not everybody has the opportunity to do. That's like, take a pause on that and say, what do I need to be doing to be at the top of that pyramid and to be fulfilled for myself personally? And so doing these value audits to ask yourself, do these values still serve me? And it was about a year ago that I looked at what I was doing, and I still love the work. It was just some of the values that I wanted to tap into were outside of my core job role at Facebook. And so I mentioned coaching as a passion of mine. I coach volleyball nights and weekends for high school girls. And I was born a coach. I will always be a coach. And everything that I ever do, there will be some element of that in my job role. And so I had the opportunity, my alma mater, the place where I played collegiate volleyball, called me up and said, hey, we've got this coaching position. Do you want to do it? And kind of the stars all aligned where, I was doing this, wrestling with the values and saying, what do I want to do? This job came open and I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to try this on for size. And what's interesting about this, we just finished our season. We finished third in the country. Like we had a very successful season. And I loved all of the things that I'm able to learn from that and got to experience through that decision. But what's interesting is I'm still continuing to look at what are the values that I have and what's the next move? Is it going to stay in college coaching? I'm doing some consulting work as well, because I still love that aspect of corporate America and coaching executives and staying in line with what's happening on that side as well. So I think it's an evolution that just continues to be shaped as I get new experiences and see things differently.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Macy. And I just love everything that you have to say about, the energy hunt, the self-exploration. We learn something new about ourselves. I feel like anytime we take on a new role, and I just really encourage everyone in the audience to always be taking those steps of introspection and to really better understand who you are, because I think it can help us better find where we fit for sure. Awesome. Okay. Well, let's kind of shift now into more of this virtual job search. Obviously, the pandemic has really pushed us in kind of a new method, definitely new approaches to how we find a job. And I know, Will, you definitely have a ton of insight into your job search from what we've talked about differed a lot from your past job searches. So I'd really love if you can kick things off and just talk to us about what was different about past searches. Talk to us about how long it took you. I think there are a lot of people, we want to know that we're not alone when we go through a job hunt. So would really love if you could just kind of comment on your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to reiterate, I'm not even sure at exact what precise moment a job search became a job search, because it doesn't really feel like it started that way, right? Like I was sort of just taking, I hate to say, I was making use of time that I could use a little bit differently, where I was literally covering less ground than I'm used to covering, and found pretty quickly when work from home set on, my network even within the company started to contract, and I was just having fewer conversations with a fewer number of people, and found myself at the same time kind of like, man, I feel like I don't miss being on the road. I don't miss traveling, but I do miss meeting new and interesting folks and just kind of really hungering to get out of what I think everybody was feeling in early 2020 was like the sea of sameness of just same conversations, same rooms, same literal virtual backgrounds we were looking at all day. And so just started a pretty exhaustive, I wish I had more elevated thinking about what prompted this, but honestly, it was just a lot of cold outreach to people who I came across that appeared to be doing interesting stuff. And it was refreshing to see, man, with a new perspective that it matters a little bit less about what building you're working from. There's a ton of interesting stuff going on out there. There were new businesses that were being sprung up. All of a sudden, every webinar or every keynote was online. And so there were opportunities to just reach out to people with no prior connection and say, hey, caught what you were up to, have some questions about it. If I think in 2019, extending an invite to someone to say, hey, will you get on a video conference with me? We don't know each other, and just chat for 15 minutes. It probably would have been a hard pass almost every single time. But all of a sudden, people were receptive to that. And so that's that's what prompted, again, a pretty organic, and Hannah, you're spot on, a relatively lengthy search, because I wasn't even sure exactly if I was looking for a job. I would absolutely do it the same way again, however, and I think that's how I'll try to just kind of always be doing some of that through the rest of my career, as opposed to waiting till I feel like I'm ready for something new. Because I met so many people that, whether I'm going to work with them in a formal capacity, meaning at the same company, or not, that I'm just so grateful to have made those connections. Quite honestly, this connection is one of those. And so just so many, I think it's the benefit of going through a relatively organic search like that is you're likely to find some things that you wouldn't have known to go looking for.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Thank you so much for sharing, Will. Macy, I know your job search, I think, maybe went a little bit different, knowing that coaching position kind of came to you, but I'm curious if you have anything to add on just, the challenges, or, what were the positives of a virtual job hunt that either you or you see other people experiencing?
Yeah. One of my hobbies is to job hunt. I know that sounds crazy, but just to go on LinkedIn and put in different job searches, kind of like looking on Zillow for your dream house, what is going on LinkedIn or any job site really, and saying, what is my perfect job? And you start to see through these job descriptions how they're, what do they call coaching, or what are they calling a particular skill? And how do I get the experience needed to be able to move into that job and to make myself qualified for something like that? So I would say this is something I've done for the last 15 years, really, is I'm always looking. There's probably not more than 2 days that go by that I don't do some kind of job search in some way, shape, or form, just to understand what's out there, what's the market need, and what are those different things that people are looking for. Yes, this job that I have now came about a little bit more organically, but like I said, with the consulting that I've been doing on the side, a lot of that has come through. I'll apply to a job and they say, you know what, you're not the best fit for this particular role, but we have this contract position open, or I'd like to connect you with somebody else who needs this area of expertise that you happen to have. And so just like Will said, not being afraid to reach out. Earlier in my career, I felt like, I was begging people, like, I promise you I'm qualified, let me work for you. Or, they would bring me in for an interview and I'm like, whatever you've got, I'll take it. And it's like being more selective with not just taking anything, and really being purposeful and have the intent of, this is what I'm looking for. And if it's not the best match, at least you've made that connection with somebody who might be able to connect you with somebody else who is more in line with what you're looking for.
Absolutely. I think that's so right there. And I'm curious, knowing that the job search can be really challenging and really isolating, talk to us a little bit about, like, what do you think is important in terms of your mindset? Like, what should your expectations be? I'm just thinking about all of those folks who are out there maybe struggling with their job hunt. What words of encouragement or tips on how to, like, approach that mindset would you share? Will, why don't you kick us off there?
Okay. Yeah, I have a few thoughts on this, because I know today I'm smiling and I'm like, oh, I'm having a ball. It's day 91. I feel so great. You would have heard a different story from me at different parts of this search I was on, where I was like, I don't know if I'm wasting all my time. Now this one connection that I've made has led to a series of interviews, and I'm on, round 7 of interviews, and I'm not even sure if this is the job so there were dark moments. It wasn't all this perfect experience, but I am happy with spending the time to do a pretty exhaustive search, so that now on the other side of it, I feel really confident in the decision I made. I also wanted to share just one other aspect of the opportunity that I ended up pursuing, and the role I'm in now. It was a situation where it was, first and foremost, a connection with the folks at the company and one of the co-founders who I'm working for now. And it got to that position where, hey, I want to come work there and work for you. I feel like he similarly was like, yeah, Will, we'd love to have you on the team. What job are you going to do, though? Because you haven't actually reached out about a specific job, and we're not 100% sure we know what role we're putting you in. And so that led to, again, an organic search, which is the nice way of saying, like, a really confusing and a lot of uncertainty of how's this actually going to shake out. But it did kind of take a different tone when I reached the point directly with him of saying, hey, I'm actually thinking about your business a lot and I don't even work there yet. So like, we've got to find a way to make this work, or let's just agree that maybe the timing isn't right, and that's perfectly fine. I share that anecdote because that mindset was one, it required a good bit of confidence on my part to possibly say the thing that kills the whole opportunity, right? Like, he could have responded to that with, okay, well, until you know what you want to do, I'm not going to bother to figure out how we would make use of you here. So call me when you know what you want to do, Will. And again, I know that's a hard thing to just say, just be confident. And there's a lot of talk about imposter syndrome and fake it till you make it. And I think some of that misses the mark in terms of what it's really intended to do. But I would say, if you're out there hunting, you've got to feel pretty rooted and confident in the value you stand to bring to an organization. And to echo Macy's point, feeling pretty secure in your values and what are your showstoppers, same as if you were searching for anything else. I think otherwise that's how a lot of people end up in jobs that then they're pretty quickly not happy with, or not terribly sure if they're having impact, and a lot of the stuff that leads to kind of a never-ending just revolving job hunt.
For sure. Macy, I'll let you jump on this topic.
Yeah, I relate so much to that feeling of it feels a bit isolating sometimes when you're like, I just want somebody to open up the door just to have a conversation. And not to get too philosophical, but the world is missing connection right now. We have been talking to our computer screens now for almost 2 years. And we don't get those endorphins of actually being with people and having that feedback and sharing that common space. The thing that I've found is there are people that want to help, even if they can't give you a job. They can be your cheerleader. They could be a sounding board. They could be somebody who helps you get to the root of what you're looking for and craft your sales pitch as somebody who's going in and trying to land a job or an interview even. And so finding those people that are willing to help, and, if it's on LinkedIn, if the networking kind of gets a bad rap because everybody hates to do it. Nobody wants to go into a room full of strangers and like make friends, but there's more organic ways of doing that. I was at the Apple store buying a phone, and I was talking to one of the salespeople, and I mentioned, I was just leaving Facebook, and he's like, what does it take to get into that company? And I'm like, well, sometimes it takes knowing somebody that works there to be able to get your resume in front of the right person with your experience or whatever. And it was just that connection that he was genuinely interested, and I genuinely wanted to help him and make him any connections that I might have within the company to be able to just kind of pay that forward, because people have done that for me. So don't be afraid. A cup of coffee, virtual even, goes a really long ways, and people are willing to help.
Yeah, I think that's so right, Macy. And I think too, just there's a question in the chat about how do you approach those people if you don't know them? So maybe it is on LinkedIn, maybe it is at a conversation. And my mindset is like, let's just go out and try to help one another. But do you have any like tactical advice on how to really start to make some of those cold connections?
I am a big fan of leading with curiosity. And it's not about having a list of 5 questions that you're going to ask everybody. It's really specific to that person. And it's a push-pull dynamic. Sharing with people, here's who I am, here's what makes me tick, here's what I'm interested in, but also leading with that curiosity where you're understanding who they are, what makes them tick, and what they're interested in and what their career path has been today. And so really just leading with those questions and making a human connection before you're trying to make a work or a corporate connection. It's the best advice I have, and something that, to be quite frank, early on in my career, I was not good at. I would go in like, oh, I've got my notepad and my pen, so we're here to have a discussion. It's like, no, put those aside and have a conversation, being a human being first. And then, you'll know pretty early on in the conversation if it is somebody that wants to lean and help, or if it's somebody that's just like, maybe they're super busy, or maybe they, don't have time to do that. Like, I don't want to say move on to the next person, but move on to the next person, because there's a lot of people that are willing to spend the time and share their expertise.
Love that. Will.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I'm gonna like jump out of my shoes just to agree with Macy, but I couldn't agree with it more. I mean, I think a mistake that I know I've made earlier in my career, and I see folks make sometimes, is they don't actually pursue the track that they're interested in. And in this case, I'm talking about they don't reach out to the people they're genuinely interested in connecting with. They reach out to people where it's like, I think this person might have a job to offer me. And so then it feels very static and forced and like, well, yeah, okay, your agenda is relatively transparent. Or in some cases, my agenda was really transparent that I'm reaching out to you because I think you have the job that I want or can offer the job that I want. But it's so much richer and more energizing when it's an actual exchange of, hey, I'm interested in something that you're putting out in the world. Maybe I read about you in the press. Maybe I saw you give a talk. Whatever it might be, I'm interested, and that's what I'm actually going to be transparent with, is why I'm interested in what you're doing. And to Macy's point, I think you'll be able to tell oftentimes before the conversation even starts, because a conversation might not take place if there's no receptivity to that. Oh, you're interested in what I have to say? Well, good thing. That's the thing I love talking about. So yeah, of course I'll talk to you about it. And if that's not there, then you'll know pretty quickly, okay, I'm going down the wrong path here, because it could be just the wrong time, or it could be that person's not actually interested in connecting on. And then cut bait. Yeah.
For sure. So much great stuff in here. I think like a couple of things to comment on. So I think talking about like your mindset when you're in that job search, I know like one of my own philosophies is like, I just want to be who I am. And if a company doesn't like me for who I am, then I probably don't want to work for them either. And I know that is something that has always been like a really helpful mindset for me to have. I think to the networking conversation, like I love like just be curious, like lead with curiosity. That's a really great phrase, Macy. And I think, yeah, like just going in and learning. I think getting to hear about other people's career paths is really powerful. Because there are so many twists and turns. It's not a straight path. I studied geology in college and now I'm doing this. So it's just helpful to see the other paths and directions that people have taken there. And I think too, along the curiosity line, because I started with purpose probably 7 or 8 months ago. And so I came out of a job search recently, and it's like, when I was on that job hunt, I would find a company that's like, oh, I'm just really interested in this company in general. I want to learn about them regardless of if they have a role for me. But then oftentimes that's going to, like, if you go and look at their employees, it's like, who do I have a connection with? Who went to the same school as I did? Those common denominators can really help make those networking asks more effective. And then you just learn about that company. And then someone, Macy, like you were saying, who can refer you into the organization. So yeah, a lot of really great tips there. We have one question in the chat. So Macy, I'm going to direct this one to you. Do you have practices or exercises that help you identify the key values that are important to you or that you bring?
Yeah, I love this question. Part of the challenge in identifying your key values is there's 2 things. First of all, like the list of values is infinite. You could search. There's a million different places where you can go look at, values. And then you have to, on the other side, understand really who you are. And there's some values that we think we should have, but, they're important, but they're not your top 5. One of the resources that I love, if you just Google James Clear, CLEAR, core values list, he's got some that'll at least get you started. And you go through there and you're like, well, these are, all important to me. But if you really just whittle it down, try to get down to 5. And that can help you to start to explore the things that are most important to you, not only in a job, but in a company. What is the company's mission? What is the company's values? And you can hopefully find something. The Venn diagram is more overlapped than not with the job and the company, with what's most important to you, and realizing, this values audit is something I try to do it about every 6 months, because different life events and different things that are happening, you're going to optimize towards different things with any major decision like a job hunt. And so knowing that what are important right now, that might change. It probably will change in the next 6 months to a year. So keep that list handy and go back and revisit it. James Clear has a lot of different resources on values and how to identify them. That list is just a decent place to start.
Love that. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so before we shift into more of the remote work, just kind of last question about this virtual job hunt. Are there any, really tactical like tips or advice that you would give to folks who are job hunting right now? Whether it's, how to do a virtual interview or whatever that looks like. Would love to hear any thoughts there. And Will, we'll kick it over to you first for this one, if you're
Yeah,
ready.
absolutely. I am ready. Absolutely. And I so appreciate the question because I think sometimes folks in Macy's in my position today don't always get really specific with here's some ways to be effective. Um, First and foremost, anything you can do to humanize the whole experience, make it feel more like a conversation. As someone who's now meeting a lot of people that I've never met in real life, I'm actually here to say video, this exchange is a really good substitute, and actually better substitute than I would have given it credit for making you feel connected to people. I'm going to meet a lot of my new coworkers for the first time in real life, and I'm actually forgetting, wait, who haven't I met in real life yet, and who have I only met over VC? So it's better than I think we give it credit for. But a lot of that happens if it feels like a human dialogue, and one-to-one or one-to-two, I think is much better than sometimes when it's, massive group conversations on video, which can feel a little bit forced. But for someone interviewing, get over the awkward dynamic of it. If we all have our ways of doing that, you can be humor, it can be to call out that it is awkward. Definitely take time to think through the how you're showing up in a virtual setting, right? As in the same way you would have spent a moment thinking through how you're going to show up to an actual building where you're being interviewed. Think through how are you going to open a virtual conversation to make it feel a little bit more like a conversation you would have in the real world, or we are having this conversation in the real world. Everything from the setting you're in, your environment, all of that stuff. Actually sweat the details to make sure audio's coming through okay, and make whatever accommodations you need to, and don't be afraid if, let's say, I've had days where there's yard work going on outside, or construction outside of my house, and there's no effective way of having a video chat in this room. Hey, we've all been there. Explain that's the situation. Is it easy enough for me to just give you a phone call? Like, just be a human being, I think, is some of the best advice I would give anybody, especially if you're new to kind of embarking on this.
Love that. Macy, anything on your end?
Yeah, to build on the human elements that Will just called out there, I think there's some things operationally speaking that you can do that I'm still trying to perfect, to be quite honest. LinkedIn has become kind of the de facto job search tool for me. I know a lot of people use it. Doing things like, checking the box that says, yes, I'm interested, so recruiters know you're open to talking to them. And there's different certifications, there's different learning opportunities, getting certified in Google AdWords. Like, there's things that you can do if depending on what your career path would be, that are inexpensive or sometimes even free for you to go and say, you know what, I'm doubling down in this particular skill, or I'm doubling down in this particular area of my career. I'm going to go learn about this. And so not only will you have that to be able to post on your LinkedIn profile, but you're also kind of doing some of that self-exploration to be like, do I really want to be doing this with my career? Yes or no? And so doing things like that, reaching out to people and asking them to write you, not a review, whatever it's called on LinkedIn, where they can promote you basically. And so having that activity show up, it's an algorithm. It's just like everything else within social media. The more active you are there, the more you're going to be showing up in front of people there. And then to Will's last point about being agile with this new means of communication. When we first started doing everything remotely, I was in person about 90% of the time with all of my corporate trainings. I was, flying all over the country to be in the classroom with people, and I loved it. The second COVID hit, we went to 100% online, and I really struggled with that because I didn't have that connection, like we were talking about. And so my first few trainings, everything had to be perfect. I had my Zoom set up, and I had my laptop, my notebook here, and everything I thought had to be perfect. And then I've realized that wouldn't be the case if I were in person. You can't control everything. And so really just being as agile as possible with all of the online stuff. We all are in this together. We've all experienced internet outages. We've all experienced, lights going off or somebody ringing the doorbell or the dog barking or the kids crying or like whatever that thing is. And so rolling with the punches has been one of my biggest learning experiences throughout this whole remote work stuff.
For sure. That's awesome. Thank you both for sharing. So now let's dive more deeply into the remote work piece. I work fully remote. You both either currently or have worked remote at some point, obviously because of the pandemic. I'm curious, what is your overall perspective on remote work? Obviously, the pandemic has pushed this forward a lot more quickly than I think we would have gotten without it. So I'm curious, just what are your overall thoughts on it? Has it been a positive change for people? What have been some of the bigger challenges? Just kick it over to you to start there, Will.
It's a big question.
Yeah.
I have tons of thoughts. I think it's net positive. I feel very confident it's net positive. I have two girls, almost 11, almost 9. Being able to be home as much as I have. My wife's been able to start a business throughout this past year, so to be home and fully plugged in at home, and really, work-life integration was not a new phrase even when we all moved into working from home, but I feel like it took on a new meaning where now we're really integrating work and life in a meaningful way. I have a positive take on it. I'm also now in a new experience of integrating myself into a new company with a bunch of people I've never worked with before in a new space that I'm back to school in many, many ways. So all that being the case, and yes, that has introduced challenges, I still feel that working from home and remote work, we shouldn't call it working from home, is going to be here long after the immediate reason that we've all had to do it, and that it's going to be to most of our benefit. There's still something unique that can happen in shared physical space, shared proximity to coworkers. Collaboration is kind of the easy example that often gets tossed around as, yeah, that's just better in person. So if I were betting on a model that's going to win the day, it's hybrid. And I'm still staying really curious myself about what is it exactly that is best done in shared physical space versus can be done perfectly well, if not better, in a remote setting. The jury's still out, but I think it's net in favor of remote.
Love that. Macy, I'll let you add your thoughts.
Yeah, I have become a big fan of remote work, but I'll be honest, like when all of this first happened, I wasn't. I felt really isolated from my coworkers. Part of the reason I loved working at Facebook was the people. That was the biggest reason I loved working there, because of the people. And when, I didn't get to see them as much. Actually, I saw some of them more, like my colleagues in Ireland and London. Like I had weekly one-on-ones with them, where before, I wasn't doing that. So there was the positives of that, but I just missed the connection. What I found is, as I've leaned into the technology and the ability to have, a 30-minute conversation, I don't have to fly to Seattle. I can actually just sit there in my office and have that, and time can be better spent. I get to spend more time with my son, to Will's point. It feels like there's more of a balance, definitely, with the remote work.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And I'm curious, I think remote work has definitely blurred the lines of home and work more. How have you all or how have you seen others really manage that division between work and life, and making sure that you're not on your computer just because it's so convenient, because it's right there in your living room or your office, that you make that you're actually making sure to sign off at the appropriate time and make sure that you still have that time with your family. Macy?
I'm smiling because I needed help with this, to be honest, because it really was just 5 o'clock hit, and it wasn't like there was a commute home. It really was just, okay, into night. And I would get my son, and then I would come back. And as soon as he went to bed, I would log back on. And there's one of my colleagues who I was meeting with on a regular basis out of Ireland. She's a certified coach. And she gave me they sound maybe silly, but actually putting your hands up on your laptop and closing it and saying, that's the last time I'm going to open this laptop for today. Taking off or silencing notifications for Outlook were some ways that once my day is done at 5 or 4 or 6 or whenever that happens to be, say, you know what, everything else can wait till tomorrow. But I will tell you, it's definitely something I continue to work on and in finding ways to maintain that balance.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Thoughts from you, Will?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question because I think if it's given proper thought and adequate thought, then some really helpful habits and routines come out of it. But I would say the majority of us, I think, are kind of just trying to replicate our workday that took place in an office setting at home, and that's where a lot of us feel like this doesn't work. So I get really curious about this, and a friend who's a writer has written extensively about this. Things like the fact that the commute did a specific job for us beyond just getting us from A to B. And so how do you incorporate, even if you don't have a commute and physical distance to cover, how do you incorporate other things that do that same job for you, right? It could be taking time in the morning to listen to a podcast. It could be actually taking a physical walk, but just going in a circle, coming right back to where you started your day. What I so appreciate about this whole opportunity and experience where all of us are working remotely is that it's given everybody space to try some pretty interesting strategies and tactics like those and so many others. So it kind of invites getting curious about ourselves and how we work best. And I'm of the thinking that a lot of what holds people back in their career is they're not quite sure what they are best at and how to get the best out of themselves. And so anything that invites us to get curious about that and introspective, I think is for the better, but it takes some work. You got to try some things. Yeah. If someone is just trying to replicate a 9-to-5 schedule now at home or from some other remote location, I think that'll be a pretty frustrating exercise. But finding out for myself that, I'm really effective at 6 o'clock in the morning at catching up on email. And that's when kind of ideas are most able to just flow out of me. So that's a great window of time now where I can be really deliberate about work that I need to get done, knowing that it doesn't mean I need to commute to downtown Chicago to be in the office by 6 o'clock in the morning. I just need to be up.
Yeah. And I love that point, Will. When do we work best? Because for me, I'm working 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. now because my remote job gives me that flexibility because my motivation plummets in the afternoon. Like I'm so much more productive in the afternoon, but it could very well be the flip side for someone else. And so I think that is something for sure very valuable. And I think the other flip side to this question, it's like, one, how do you separate? How do you make sure you're not on your computer too much while you're at home? But I think the other flip side of that is like, what if it's like someone struggling to be motivated in their home? Any tips or like any experience that you all have had with that flip side of the coin? Will, if you have thoughts, or Macy, you were going to talk. Go right ahead.
I was going to say that most of my coaching conversations, whether it was at Facebook or whether it's the consulting stuff I'm doing right now, are around this idea of motivation, burnout. Like we've been looking at the same 4 walls now for however long that is. Like, what does that look like? And, I love Will's recommendations. In fact, Will, I think we've had one-on-ones where it's like, let's go take a walk, let's get outside and get some fresh air.
Definitely have.
And being okay with, turning off your video or it's the motivation and the inspiration are things that I think people are desperately seeking out because, it's just been missing. And so finding ways to have non-work conversations even, and, leading with that curiosity that we talked about earlier and say, we're not going to talk about work. Let's talk about, what are you working on at home or who's somebody interesting that you've met in recent weeks or whatever that is, and change it up where you're not just all business all day, every day. You think about how much we're actually working now. And, it's a full, if it's 8 hours, 9 hours, however long it is, you're sitting at your laptop or your desk a lot of times. And the only times you're taking a break is a bio break or when you're maybe getting a cup of coffee or something to eat. That wasn't how we were working in the office. We would go to we had micro kitchens where we'd go get a cup of coffee and we'd see somebody that, we hadn't connected with in a while and we'd have an actual conversation. And so figuring out ways to include those micro breaks throughout your day to give your brain a rest. Because your brain does have to have that kind of catch-up time to be able to process and to work effectively and efficiently. And so not just making it about work all day, every day. If you need to go take a run, or if you want to get on the Peloton, or if you want to do a yoga stretch or whatever that is, try to incorporate those types of things into your day to day, and just remember to take those mental breaks.
Hannah, I have one other thing. You can tell I have one other thing to offer on this. I hope it's okay.
Yeah.
One example that I just noticed that I think is so hopefully productive, at least for me and the folks that I work around, is when I go back to thinking about how stuff would play out in traditional office settings, I definitely noticed a discrepancy among the cohort of working parents in how working moms would talk about the balance of home and life, and there was a discrepancy between how working moms and working dads would balance the jobs to be done at work and at home. Frankly, working dads is a term that I don't think you even heard tossed around that much, whereas working moms is a term I think we're all familiar with. I've found so much value in being able to, both for myself and hopefully for my peers, in being able to just be more transparent, very naturally, not deliberately, that like, hey, we're gonna have to have this call if it's at 8:30 in the morning while I'm getting my kids off to school and maybe my camera's off, or like I'm wiping noses and putting book bags on, or Wednesday is when my wife works late, so I'm trying to be more helpful at home, and you're competing with school pickup and some other things that have to happen at the end of the day. I think things like that, people being able to just be more transparent about the role they play in their life as opposed to just at work, is so much for the better in terms of how we all work together, how we all actually coexist at work, and just lead with a lot of the qualities that I think we've been talking about for a long time that we want to see, but we haven't really gotten out of old habits.
For sure. Thank you. Well, I have two more big questions I really want to get to, but I want to encourage anyone, if you have questions for Will or Macy, please start to post those in the chat. We will get to as many as we can. While folks are thinking, Macy, you started to dive into this, and I kind of want to flip this over to you, but it's like, what advice do you have for folks who are working with a remote or partially remote team? How do we build relationships with our team? Being that, working with a team that we do work with is so often just like the best part of the job. So how do we still build those connections in a virtual world?
Yeah, it's a really good question. As somebody who is coaching on hard situations sometimes with managers or with leaders, what I found is when I had the relationship prior to working remotely, that maintained, but building those new connections, that took some time. Mm-hmm. And I had the privilege of working with John Levy, who's a New York Times bestselling author of You're Invited. And he talks about how do we build these connections. And sometimes we think I am going to trust somebody and then I'm going to be vulnerable with them. And what he says is that's actually not the case. And it's even more important in a virtual environment where you have to be a little bit vulnerable with somebody to earn that trust. And so sharing with yourself things about you personally and professionally, then it's no longer Macy, the L&D person. It's Macy, who has a 5-year-old son, single mom who is a volleyball coach. There's layers to all of us. And so understanding those layers with everybody is one way to help foster those, and just know that remotely it's going to take a little bit more time sometimes than maybe in person. And then the other thing, getting back to the questions, one of the questions I found kind of helped to build both trust and got some people to lead with vulnerability is, what's your biggest challenge right now? That works with colleagues, that works with friends, that works with potential job employers, where you're looking for what are their challenges, and how can I uniquely solve for those different things. And so again, being a human first, I think can help in forging those relationships.
Yeah, I love the vulnerability piece. Huge fan. Thank you for sharing, Macy. Will, anything to add on your end?
Well, I go to Macy for a lot of advice. So the advice that she would give is now the advice I would give. So I'm also one to buy into the vulnerability school of thought and camp. I think there's a really important role that instinct plays within the space that we're talking about. I think, interestingly enough, as soon as we think we need a job, we kind of stop listening to our gut and we start listening to whatever voice is telling us how we're supposed to sound, or what looks impressive.
Mhm.
I think there's a really important job that our instinct does for us, along the lines of what we're talking about. I'll stress again, taking kind of a nonlinear approach. I think that works both in a short-term, matter of time, like a job hunt, but also over the course of a career. If I could go back and give my earlier career self some advice, I'd be a little bit less preoccupied with linear trajectory and more thinking about how to build the most comprehensive set of skills, with a lot of different experiences that hopefully lead to something that's more in the value space than in a job title space.
For sure. Awesome. Okay. My last question is as it relates to our people leaders. So as we're all, approaching, really diving deep into this remote world, what do our people leaders need to be doing to support their remote and virtual teams? Macy, do you want to kick us off there?
I think I might, like, knowing Will, he did this really well. So I am going to pass it over to him because Will,
Perfect.
I don't even know if you have if you did this intentionally or if it's just something like your teams felt supported, we'll call it before and after, but I'd be curious because you actually walked the walk on this.
Well, that's kind of you. I think you do too. And I go to you for as a sounding board and guidance on this all the time. But I think why I have a lot of heart for this specific question is it does in fact go back to something Macy was just talking about, which is vulnerability and trust. As what leaders really need to do right now, I feel, is put trust in their people, be really transparent with, here's what I'm trying to do, and here's what I don't know. That's a phrase that I think too often leaders are afraid to use is, hey, I don't know. I don't know what working remotely effectively as a team that used to not have to work remotely is going to look like. I don't know if we're all going to like it. I don't know if we're going to go back to the way it was or not. I think just being vulnerable to that extent to share what's unknown here, gives everybody on a team permission to acknowledge what they don't know. And it might involve, they don't know if they want to keep doing this. They don't know if they're going to be good at it. But I think that's kind of the vein that needs to be tapped into by leaders with teams of people, especially right now. It conveys so much in the space of empathy, of trust. And what I think, unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of leaders did instead was they kind of tightened the grip on everything, right? So I'm gonna be really deliberate about putting virtual happy hours on the calendar every single Monday night, whether or not we like those or not. And it was all with great intentions of people keeping people connected. But I think it made people feel like, oh my God, somehow I have less autonomy at home than I used to have in an office. And so it's just a time to be really deliberate about leading with trust.
Yeah, I love all of that. Trust, empathy, vulnerability, for sure. Macy, I'll let you add.
Yeah, I wanted Will to share that because he was somebody that I saw doing this really, really well. And when a leader's doing their job and supporting their team, whenever you talk to individuals on the team and they're happy, healthy, optimistic, not that everything is perfect, but I think that does lend how Will led with empathy. He validated and I saw this firsthand where he was validating the situations of each of the people on his team. He had some working parents. He had some people living by themselves who felt really secluded. And so understanding the unique opportunities that exist within each person on the team. And then the other thing I would say is we're kind of entering this new frontier where we're defining what this remote work environment is, where hybrid is very much a thing, where you might have a handful of people all in a conference room together, and then you have one person on VC, or you have 3 people on VC and 2 people in a room together, whatever that is. And I think as a leader, it's really important to be inclusive of that too. It sounds really tactical, but remember that sometimes it is alienating to be the only person on VC. And so making sure that you're including them, even in the room setup, to make it really inclusive where they feel like they're just sitting there. And I think that as we do this more, we're going to get much, much better at what that hybrid situation looks like. but just be thoughtful of everybody's situation and what they're going through.
Wow, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you all so much. Thank you to our audience for joining us today. We're really grateful for your time and attention. We will wrap things up. If you want to learn more about Purpose Jobs, today's event house, just check us out at purpose.jobs. You can always find Will and Macy on LinkedIn. And thank you again. We really appreciate it. And everyone have a great rest of your day.